I know Dina well enough that I don't mind. But yeah, for the folks who haven't seen, I'll keep it a little briefer just because I've had the pleasure of actually being on twice with AMA. So I'm assuming most of the audience might have seen me or has the opportunity to go back and see them. So real briefly is I'm Steve. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur. I joke I was doing startups before they were cool, in the mid 90s, right? It seems like, I'm like startup grandpa over here, I guess, in that respect. I worked at a bunch of different venture-backed startups, and I was always usually the founding CTO or some type of, technical role. So, highly technical over the years, but I also have a degree in, like political science. I also have a degree in economics. Through my MBA as well, and some postgraduate work at London School of Economics. So like when crypto first popped up, like about 12, 13 years ago, it piqued my interest, both from like, just maybe from the libertarian values perspective, but then I can understand things like a deflationary monetary supply, and I can also understand cryptology, right? So maybe a little bit of of an oddball that I can speak to both sides of the equation. And I was running a startup accelerator in Hong Kong, probably around 2011 or 2012, and a company applied, and that was basically running Ledger, like a hardware wallet. And this is like 2012, and this was like the Mt. Gox attacks and things like that. So it was I had no idea how any of this stuff worked. I was very curious about it. So I went on, an exchange and bought a bunch of Bitcoin. And it was $60 a Bitcoin, by the way, at the time, or $67, I forget. I guess now they tax you. So I actually have to figure out cost basis. And never really looked back. I can't say that I'm like full-time crypto person either, but it's been part of both personally and professionally what I've been doing, blockchain and crypto, ever since. Probably a few years later, the last startup I was at, which we sold, I went and co-founded a venture fund. And while we are not predominantly a crypto fund, we have invested in blockchain companies before. And we can't buy liquid tokens, that requires different licenses and things like that. So that I get to explore and dive into those by being advisors to companies that do that. There's nothing that prevents me. I don't need a license to hang out with all you fine folks. And why it's interesting that was chosen to be on this panel is, with a background and a degree in political science, I've always had an interest in the intersection of tech and technology. And I actually started working with a trade organization about 22, 23 years ago, talking about boring issues such as like the Microsoft antitrust trial, HIPAA, things that like we take for granted today, but we're in front of the Congress and the courts, 20, 25 years ago. And have stayed working with that trade organization and have, been to Capitol Hill a countless number of times to either testify or do some light lobbying. I can't really say lobbying because I was never registered as a lobbyist. And obviously the issue with stablecoins has come up, and I feel like there's a bit of a land grab, and we'll get into this in the seminar. This will be a great transition to getting started. So I tried to insert myself into that conversation with the House Financial Services Committee. And I was able to actually speak with them before their first hearing back in February. Dina helped me prep. And it's interesting. And, I think the results of that will come out in the conversation. But, it's why the regulation I find is important. As Dina said, there's one aspect that, I feel like the crypto industry should be raising their hand and asking for certain things, because when they push back on the other things, it doesn't look like they're pushing back on everything, right? So we'll get into that as the conversation transpires over the next 45 minutes or so.
Absolutely. And so for everyone here, if you have any questions that come up, please ask them, post them in the chat. I know that there's going to be questions around,